Hi everyone, it seems we're live now. Maybe the audio problem will be fixed, maybe not. Anyway, I will probably, as usual, use the computer recording and upload it on YouTube. Today we're going north, so I said in this tea exploration journey we're going from south to north. So yesterday we studied the Bulangshan area, and now we're just going a notch north and we're going to explore the Banzhang area. So for today I will brew this tea from Bak Hanoi. This is a tea that we made this spring, so you can have a look at the cake. I'm going to open it for you. Let me just put this aside. And Bak Hanoi tea is the most expensive tea in our range for now. Today is we're going to study the most expensive area of Menghai, and overall one of the most expensive area in the Pu-erh tea world. Okay, so let's get some leaves out. I'm going to put that in the guy one. So you can see that the leaves are pretty big, actually. Quite the same as Lao Man-erh, especially when you receive the Mao-chai. It's really beautiful. They have really big and furry leaves. This is not the case for all of the Banzhang area, so we're going to talk about this during this session. So my water is hot. Let me give a first brew of this. So as usual, we're going to first have a look at Google Earth and see what we can find. So let's go. Let's start here. Okay, so we are on Google Earth. I'm going to zoom in on Sichuan Ban while brewing my tea. And so if you look here, we're going to maybe take out the names. So you can see here you have Jinghong and the Mekong River. Then you have Menghai, which is here, and we're south of Menghai. So as you know, Menghai is the main place for Pu-erh tea business, and it's a big, a major area for Pu-erh tea. South we have that flat land around Monghun, and we need to go south. And south you can see you have this big mountain range here, and we're going to go about in the middle today. So this is actually Lao Banzhang. So that Banzhang area is comprised of I would say three villages which are really notable. You have Lao Banzhang here, which is the biggest village with the biggest amount of tea and also the most famous, the most expensive. On the side here you have Ban Pen, which is a Lahu village. Administratively it belongs to Hekai, which we'll see in our next video, but I put it in the Banzhang area because it's very close. It's only 3 kilometers away from Banzhang area, from Lao Banzhang. And then if we go south, so you have a bit of forest, you have a windy road that goes on the side, and there you have Xin Banzhang. And then when you leave Xin Banzhang, here you have a little crossroad. The southern road will take you to Lao Man-erh, which we treated yesterday. You can see Lao Man-erh is just there. And so Lao Man-erh is part of Bulangshan, so Xin Banzhang is the southernmost village of the Banzhang area. And if you go west of Xin Banzhang, you will have Bak Hanoi, which is where this tea is from, actually. So let's first have a quick sip, okay? Let me just see. Yeah. Let's first have a quick sip of that tea because I had to prepare this video and I haven't had tea in a couple of hours. You can see on the first rinse maybe what the leaves look like. It's they are also yellowish. It's quite they like to do a similar processing style as Bulangshan in that area. And this is really where my wife learned to make tea. She went to Lao Banzhang and learned with tea farmers from Lao Banzhang. This is a processing style which I think is quite common among people who are interested in making tea nowadays. It consists in starting with a strong fire to get the leaves to shrink as quickly as possible. So you start with a strong fire, you have to shuffle, put in a bit of work and shuffle quickly. And then after maybe five minutes or so, when the leaves have shrunk, you lower the fire, or generally if you set it right, you don't really need to adjust the fire. It will die down naturally. So you just put in you put in the right amount of wood in the correct position, and it will give you big flames at the start, and after 5 minutes it will tone down, and then you can keep cooking the tea at a lower temperature, using the steam to get your tea cooked. So it's half steaming and half frying, like frying through conduction, you could say. And this lasts for about 20 minutes, I would say. 20 minutes in Jingmai because our leaves are quite small, but it really depends on the size of your leaves. So for example, this Bakanoi tea, which has pretty big leaves, I guess you would need to cook it for about 30 minutes. But in Lao Banzhang, they have both the big leaf varietal and the small leaf varietal. So it might depend on what kind of material you have. And that's where really the craftsmanship comes into place. You cannot really give set parameters. It's very much like cooking. And one of the characteristics of, I think the main characteristics of this Banzhang area is really the intensity of the tea. I think this is the most intense tea you get in Western Xishuangbanna, in Menghai area. It is powerful, but it's also not too aggressive. In a way, you could say it's a very average tea. It has a bit of everything that you'd like to have in a Pu-erh tea. Okay, you get a medium bitterness and astringency. You get some nice fragrance, although for Bakanoi, I would say for Bakanoi the fragrance is not anything fancy really. It's more akin to the Bulangshan fragrance for Bakanoi. Then you get you get plenty of huigan, and you can really feel the tea flow down your body, and it's followed by a usually intense chachi. And I don't know what makes this thing. Maybe we're going to try to explore it together today. But when I drive my car on that area, I always wonder, it's really part of the magic of tea, because you cannot know exactly why the tea tastes like this, but you can still acknowledge how amazing it is. So, okay, let's just go on Google Earth. And I'd like to, because I actually never took a good look at this area through Google Earth, because it's quite an accessible place. And so if we take a better look at this big mountain range, which looks like a spaceship, so like the cockpit of the spaceship would be around here. So you see you have Jinghong, which is there, and if you start here it's all forest. It's really not a famous area. And then you have there you have Pasha area. Okay, I'm going to put the names. It will help me a bit. Here you have like Pasha area. Okay, Pasha village is there. You have Gelanghe Lake. I will treat this area in another video. And when you continue, so I guess you would have Hekai around here. This is Hekai. This is probably for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. You have that big lake here, and the big lake points straight at Banpen. You see here? Let me just reorient the map. So the north is up. You have that lake. You have the dam here, and you go, and it points straight at Banpen here. And then you have Banzhang. Then you go south. You have Xin Banzhang. and west, you have Bakanoi here. And what I noticed while preparing this video is the area is relatively flat. If you look here, it seems to be the lowest altitude point, and it's at 1500 meters, which is I think 400 meters higher than Menghai. So there seems to be a kind of a plateau in the middle of that big mountain range. And from this plateau, of course, it's a bit hilly, but if you look at the altitude, not that much. And so there are a few things we're going to investigate here, notable geographical features. First, you can see lots of different colors. So you have those places you can see southeast of Banzhang, which are completely bare bone, and these are images from 2020, so it's quite recent. That's quite interesting. Why would you cut the forest in such a big area and prepare all those little roads? You see, so it seems there's some farming activity going on here. And yet when you look at it, you see no crops, and you don't even see tea trees here. So what's going on there? We can see they have ponds. So ponds could be used for raising fish, or they could be a point to get some water for irrigation or for spraying pesticides. Well, usually when you have such a big pond, it's usually for growing fish there. Okay, so these images, do we have the... It was taken in March. So maybe in March they don't have any crops there, but maybe during, at one point in the year, maybe during the rainy season, so 3 months later, they will maybe grow corn, I guess, at this altitude. Corn is quite a staple for feeding chicken and even pigs. But here, if you go, so here we're east of Bakanoi, we can see the color is different because this is a clay soil and it looks a bit wet, and it's because these are paddies. So in there they grow rice, okay? And rice grown in paddies has the best yield, okay? It's the most efficient way to grow rice. If you don't have paddies because your geography don't allow it, you can still grow on these hills. But this is what we call upland rice. You just plant it like corn. It tastes very good. It's a bit more fragrant in my opinion, but it's getting quite rare nowadays. You find that only in Myanmar and in Laos. Then we have some pieces of seemingly untouched forests here. You can see that the cover is you can see that the forest cover is thick, especially here. And this is something I noticed when I traveled to Bakanoi. You can see some really kind of wild areas. And then if we look around Banzhang, for example, we have a more scattered cover, which denotes some tea gardens. And here the pics are actually really good. You can even see, and you could guess these are probably small tea trees. You can see some of them have been planted in rows, so they were planted probably quite recently. They are not ancient tea gardens. But in that area, I would guess these could be ancient tea gardens, maybe ancient tea gardens in which they planted newer trees, just like we did in Chiang Mai when the price of tea increased. The farmers, they tend to increase the density, the plantation density. And so you can see really a lot of tea gardens. So this area is expensive, but it's not like most other expensive places. If I think of like Mansong or Bingdao or Fenghuangwo or Bohetang, these places have a very low yield. Okay, they have a very low yield, and so that's partly what makes the price. Of course, they might taste exceptional, but you only get maybe a ton or less a year. So that's really what makes the rarity. But you cannot say Banzhang tea, for example, is particularly rare. Of course, in the market at large, it is rare, but you can still go to the village and get some Banzhang tea. Will it be really from the village? we'll talk about this in the second part of this video. I just want to finish the tour here. So yeah, it's quite interesting because by looking at this area you could think that it wouldn't really rely on it could be a pretty self-reliant area, because they seem to have a lot of space dedicated to growing crops. So maybe there was not that much trade in the past there. Maybe it was a very secluded area. You could see that the Dai would occupy the main flatlands around Menghai, around Mengzhe, in Menghun. That's where they would have the highest yield, you know, with growing rice, because it's all paddies there. And the less fortunate, you could say, the less powerful ethnic groups, they would have to live in a less suitable soil. So they would live in the mountain, and they would be like the Hani and the Lahu, which populate this Banzhang area. Banpan and Bakanoy are Lahu, and Lao Banzhang and Xin Banzhang are Hani. And it's true that 15-20 years ago these areas were very poor, actually. So maybe I can show you first. Oh, let me just check the comments very quickly. I need to pop this out. I hope you can hear me well and that this streaming is going well. It seems to be doing okay. So let me just here. Yeah, so this is a picture of Lao Banzhang that I took in 2010. It was probably during the summer or early autumn. I haven't visited the Lao Banzhang village since then because well, I don't feel that tea is a right fit for my my audience. I would say it is very expensive tea, and well, we sourced some Bakanoy tea. I think, of course, it offers a better price for value. We'll talk about the price a bit later, but you can see that even back in 2010, they are already building, they were already extending the village, like you can see in the background. They still have some very modest houses at that time. And so this is the pictures I took of the tea gardens. So if you look, it looks like that they cleared the weed not so long ago, so it was probably at the end of summer. That's when you see that kind of landscape. And you can also see they had planted a lot of small trees. These trees must be maybe 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old. So it was back in 2010. This village got popular around 2005, I think, with a specific cake which is called Gan-en, I think. I'm not sure if that's the cake that really launched Lao Banzhang under the spotlight, but I remember it was a production from a famous factory. In the past, of course, Dai would use this Banzhang material to make blends. If you have very, very old cakes from before the 90s, you can get some gusu from Lao Banzhang inside. Then during the 90s, they tended not to source gusu, but maybe it was possible. I'm not sure. So these are what the garden looked like in 2010, and this is a more recent picture with obviously a better camera. This is just on the outskirts of Lao Banzhang. I was going to Lao Mana at the time. I think I took this one last year, and I just stopped the car and had a walk in the tea gardens just to check. Now in that place I visited, it's not the biggest tea trees. They do have some pretty big tea trees, although not as big, I think, as Hekai, but maybe on par with Lao Mana. Overall, it's much bigger trees than in Jingmai, for example. And you can see they like to put those bamboo sticks. So here the tea is not that big, but I guess they're afraid to fall when harvesting the tea, so they use the bamboo. Okay, sorry, we're back. The VPN crashed. So these are tea gardens around the village, and you see these tea trees might very well be the tea trees I took 10 years ago. You know, the tea trees can grow fast, and it seems the soil is quite also fertile in that area. I'm not sure. I haven't asked really and compared with Bulangshan. In Bulangshan, they say it's quite fertile. We're a bit more north and on a different soil. I checked the soil map, but it's quite heterogeneous, so I haven't really analyzed in depth. Now you can see this soil was tilled, so that's a way of clearing the weeds. It was probably taken during the winter, I guess. That's when you do that kind of work, or after the autumn harvest. And you can see quite a good amount of organic matter in this soil. You can see that by the way the agglomerates form. When they are more round, it means there's more organic matter. It also looks very sandy. Yeah, I remember I touched and it was quite sandy. Because I'm wondering, like, why does Lao Banzhang tea taste so good? So I was on the outskirts of the village looking at the soil. You can stay by the side of the road and check that, take some pictures. I didn't notice anything special really with that soil. Huh? You don't even get a particularly thick layer of organic matter at the top. You can see some more brown spots at the top, some bits of red, but then you know that it's hard to say anything special here. So yeah, there's no big secret, I think, at least at a first look like this from the soil. So maybe let's take a step back and take a look at the landscape. And like you can see, it's hilly, but it's not really super big altitude contrasts. For example, this was probably around Bacanoy, so let's say you go to Bacanoy and so you have this discolored soil. I have pictures of that, we'll see that. But here it's not really big mountains, but you can see that there's a lot of topography like this, a lot of rolling hills. Interesting, because I checked the altitude gradient, for example, in the tea gardens of Lao Banzhang. So their tea gardens, you can see, are around the village. I think the big trees are mostly in the south. And then you have to cross that forest. I assume there's a path here, and it seems there's another area with tea trees. I don't know if they are ancient or not. By zooming in, we can see they are planted in rows, so they might be younger. I'm not even sure whether they belong to Lao Banzhang or Xin Banzhang. Xin Banzhang doesn't have that many ancient tea gardens, but it's quite famous for its small trees, which also sell for a hefty price. You can see all here there might be some older trees inside. Now the plantation density, it's very dense and very high here. And so yeah, if you look at the altitude gradient, here we're at 1800 meters, and we're all between like 1700 here, and what looks like the top is like 1820. So it's an altitude gradient which is quite comparable to Tapingzhang in Jingmai. Maybe that lack of altitude difference could generate maybe a microclimate, or could maybe, you know, like better retain the mist and create a more humid environment. I'm just guessing here, but that could be factors that we could investigate. I would love to find weather data actually on these places. Okay, good to know that the video is good. Okay, so let's continue with the pictures. So this is what the landscape looks like. You see, this must be looking towards the more wild area, because you don't see that much, and you see the peak in the background is probably in Myanmar, or it's a peak southwest, quite far away in Bulangshan, maybe in an area I haven't been to. So sometimes when I'm at the top of those hills like this, I wonder, I wish I could travel more. And yeah, you see, I found an interesting picture I took in 2010, because if we go back here, these are the hills. This is a picture of those hills that I was talking about earlier. And you can see that this one was taken at the end of summer, and it's green. Now the picture resolution is not really good, but it looks like corn. So they might still be planting corn there. Or maybe they don't do it anymore, because why would you plant corn now that the tea is so expensive? For 1 kilo of tea you can buy a truckload of corn. And so you can see on other areas, like I said, they don't seem to plant much, but you can see here small tea trees growing. So eventually, I guess these hills, these barebone hills, would be good places to establish more tea gardens. Now, do they have the workforce to manage it? Well, I guess they can find it, they can afford it, definitely. Do they have the right to plant tea gardens? That's something you need to check at the government level. But you can see in some areas they did. This is what used to be a barebone hill, and now it's planted with what's looked like maybe 20 years old, maybe 10 years old tea gardens. And you can see the paddies on the bottom right corner. Okay, another picture of those tea gardens. So now you really have a massive amount of tea which is produced in that area. And you see here the discoloration, so that's interesting. This is what I noticed on Google Maps near Bakanoi. This is probably these hills. And this discoloration, it's quite rare to see this. I asked friends about the possible geological causes. I think it could be a process called tropical podzolization, where because of the rain, some elements are washed away, and in the end you end up like with a pure sand, like a beach, and it's white like this. But I'm not sure if it's the correct assumption. But anyway, for the farmers, it will probably mean discrepancy in fertility. I remember I was in southwestern France when I was a student doing some surveys, and we had soils like this, and the farmer explained it was a bit complicated to do the fertilization, because he needed to account for the differences in soil fertility. Now, of course, I'm not sure if the farmers in Yunnan go to that extent to plan their fertilization. But you can see that's quite an interesting feature. And I guess in the background is probably the dam of that big lake. And yeah, you can see you have a lot of untouched forest around Bakanoi. So here is more of the landscape. Oh, and yeah, they have the Dai plantation. So let's go a bit west of Bakanoi. Let's reorient north. Bakanoi is that village here, stretched quite thin. Their tea is there. Well, I will just go there in a minute. And here we have a picture taken at different season. And you can see here, this is all tea plantations, Taidichra. But not any kind of Taidichra, this is organic Taidichra. And this is quite a big plantation, you can see. So this is Bakanoi, it just starts right after Bakanoi here. You see? Yeah, you can keep going and keep going. And this is one of the biggest plantations, I think, in it's like their flagship plantation for Menghai tea factory for Dai. They are organic and they grow on a good soil, so they must be pretty good quality, I guess. This is what it looks like. It looks a bit like basic tidy. You have a bit more biodiversity in there. I guess at some point in the year they would put those little yellow and blue flags to prevent to have too much insect. These are sticky flags. Also a really beautiful landscape. It was at sunset. I think I was just on my way to Laomana at that time. It's really a great place. And I found this picture funny. Does it mean you're supposed to slow down or making tea or something? Okay, and so I'll explain a bit more about Bac Hanoi. So this is the village. It's quite stretched out. Let's go back on Google Earth, back to Bac Hanoi. The village is there, and most of their tea gardens are on that hill here. You see, they even put the name of the village on the hill. You can clearly see, and there you can see some rows of tea trees. So it means that probably in the past those ancient tea gardens were not that densely planted. That's why you have just a small amount of big trees in those gardens. They grow on an extensive area, but because the tea is expensive, they planted a lot of small trees. And you might have some spots, some spots where you'll find more big trees. This is often due to the microclimate. In some places, maybe the hailstorms are less severe, or maybe there is less frost, and so the tea trees will tend to survive longer. When you check a tea garden like this, it's unlikely that all the tea trees you see were planted at the same time. Usually some die every year and you replant them, so you will have tea trees of all ages. If you want to check the surface roughly, so you see, without zooming in or out, you have about this spot. The gardens in Xin Banzhang are around here, but it's all small gardens. We can see that the ancient tea gardens of Lao Banzhang are a bit bigger. So you cannot say that it's a really big mountain. But it's used to supply tea to Lao Banzhang. Yeah, we can go inside the mountain and just have a look at have some really big trees there. Now the problem, I tend to shoot those big trees less because they are a bit less, a bit harder to get a good picture. Usually, you see, you can only get like part of the trunk because they are too big, and if you take on a too wide lens, it just gives a big green blob. So it's pretty hard to find good pictures, I would say, to take good pictures of individual big trees. And this is the farmer I work with, sitting on the tea tree. My wife visited him a couple of months ago. We just received his autumn tea, so we will have some autumn Bac Hanoi. I haven't sourced that much autumn tea. I think that the season was average, you could say, not really bad, but I feel I have a couple of spring tea coming in and also some ripe Pu-erh. But I felt like Bac Hanoi tea, that's the kind of tea you want to have in autumn, because it's much less pricey in autumn, and since it's naturally a very intense tea, some people might even prefer the autumn version because it's less overwhelming, you could say. Okay, I'm talking and not drinking that much tea. Let's go back to Lao Banzhang. This is Chenchang Tea Factory. Yeah, I don't have the pictures after that. Okay, let's just keep it to that picture then. Anyway, we'll go on Google Earth. Chenchang Tea Factory. Let's go back to Lao Banzhang. It's located here, right at the entrance of the village. And it is the biggest factory in Lao Banzhang, and it has quite a story, I would say. The founder is called Chen Shanhe, and he's a billionaire, I guess, from the real estate business, and he likes tea. So he just decided for fun as a side business to open the biggest tea factory in Menghai. And his factory is quite fancy. I visited it. It's a bit oversized. When I visited, it seemed like they only used like 20% of the space. But yeah, this guy has really big vision, you could say. And he wanted to make the best tea in Menghai, so he went straight to Banzhang and said, how about I buy the whole village? And this is really the contract that he proposed, the deal he proposed to the farmers in Banzhang. You know, he wanted every farmer to sign a contract. He will build the factory. Basically, the farmers stop processing the tea. They just harvest the leaves, deliver it to the factory, and then they get paid every month. Actually, their whole yearly income is divided and paid every month, instead of getting a big amount of money in spring and then not much the rest of the year. At the time, it sounded like almost like a social plan, because those people were very poor before, and it seems in the early years they didn't really know how to use the money, and they would get scammed and waste their money in gambling. There were some kind of social issues, but I think partly maybe because some people were a bit jealous of seeing these impoverished farmer suddenly making so much money, because the price really went up crazily at that time. And part of it is probably true, but over the years, I guess they knew how to invest and everything. And so you could say it's a 50% success, because what happened is they said, okay, we'll do the contract with you. And then secretly they kept making the tea themselves, because they already had a lot of customers asking for tea. So maybe the tea from their best tea gardens, they would process it themselves at home, and they would deliver the average tea, the tea they couldn't say privately, they would deliver it to the tea factory. And I guess it would be hard, like for the Chensang employee to tell people, hey, don't cook tea at home, you're not allowed to do that, you know. So in the end, I think maybe half of the village has some relationship with, has a contract with the factory. We've seen the same dynamic in Jingmai, where we have the Lansang Gucha Gongse, which sources a lot of tea. And some farmers are under contract with them, and they seem to be doing pretty well, because they have huge volumes guaranteed. But for Chensang factory, it's different, because Banzhang is really the most famous village probably overall in the whole of Yunnan, probably in the whole of the Pu-erh tea industry. So you can imagine the flow of visitors they get during spring, to the point that you could say that they're probably not as welcoming, or they are more business minded, you know, than other villages, especially considering the price of their tea. That's why I don't go there, because I can't really afford their tea, I would say. So I don't want to take much of their time if I know I'm not going to buy the tea eventually. And so I guess they must be a bit wary of receiving lots of visitors who just go to drink good tea. So I can totally understand that. Yeah, so, but still, Chensang Chachang is one of the largest factory, and now they have processing units in many villages, in most of the villages actually. They make big blends, and they sell that Lao Banzhang cake, which is, well, some say it's pure Lao Banzhang, some say it's blended. It's quite expensive, but not crazy if it's real pure Lao Banzhang. So it might be worth a try actually for your Pu-erh tea culture. I think their blends are okay. As far as big factory go, they make pretty good quality, you could say, for big factory tea. Let me just. So Banzhang is not in the Yiwu area. Huh? We are now in Menghai. You can see, we are in the southwest of Sichuan Banna. Menghai is just there. So it's the west, southwest of Xishuangbanna, and Lao Banzhang is there. Okay, let me drink a bit of tea. So this is the kind of tea that takes a bit of time to open up. So again, this is very expensive tea, and don't brew it if you just have like 20 minutes for a session. This is not the suitable tea for this kind of session. For this, I would say you need to dedicate it at least 1 hour, and preferably not do a live stream while you're drinking the tea, because there's so much to appreciate in that tea. But overall, sometimes I even grandpa style it. It starts quite soft, but you have some bitterness that goes up. So this is Bakanoi, and this is not really exactly the same. I think it's the same as some of the Banzhang tea. I'm not a big expert at Lao Banzhang tea taste. The main problem with Lao Banzhang tea is that most of the samples which are labeled Lao Banzhang are not. So you're not even sure what's the real Lao Banzhang and what's the fake Lao Banzhang. And so it's very hard to learn about what true Lao Banzhang is. Funnily enough, like every tea vendor will claim to have a real Lao Banzhang tea, but they need to maybe have higher standards when it comes to the veracity of the claims. Okay. At least I can be confident this is true Bakanoi tea, and I will just explain you why right now. So Lao Banzhang is probably the most mislabeled tea, because you cannot expect the average tea enthusiast in China to know 50 or 100 different names of tea mountains. But people with general knowledge about tea will generally know that Lao Banzhang is the best Pu-erh tea, for example. They will think that. They might not have the budget for that, but they still want to taste. And maybe they can only afford to spend $50 on a cake. So people come to you and ask, do you have Lao Banzhang tea? And if you say, okay, I have, it's $1,000 a cake, they will walk away. And if you say that you don't have, they will also walk away. I was told this story by a tea seller in Xishuangbanna. In a way, if you just care about doing the business, really about making money, you need to have those labels. You need to have those Banzhang and Bingdao and Guafengzai or Bohetang, because these sell, you sell with the name. And if you go to Menghai, so Banzhang has become a taste, you could say. And in a way, a lot of people think Banzhang is overly aggressive, but it's not really my experience. Banzhang is really very harmonious. It has a bit of everything that you'd like in a Pu-erh tea. So it has moderate everything, I think I even wrote this down here. Like it has moderate bitterness and astringency, fairly complex fragrance, very good huigan, very deep huigan, good energizing chachi, medium minerality due to the bitterness and astringency, medium thickness. It's not as thick as Yiwu tea, nor as thin as like Mongsong or Mongku tea. And so I think that's maybe what makes it the best tea. It's really the ambassador of Pu-erh tea. It has a bit of everything, and every aspect of it is intense. That's really about the intensity. So through blending, you could reproduce the same profile. And so when you buy a mislabeled cheap Banzhang cake, you can expect it to have a certain profile, a typical Menghai profile. This will be a blend of Menghai tea. And if you go to Menghai, you will find some professional blenders who can blend the Banzhang tea according to your budget. Let's say you want a Banzhang taste as at $100 per kilo, or at $30 per kilo, or at $500 per kilo. He can arrange this, by using material from different places. I would guess that the tea from the big plantation of the Dai plantation, which is close to the Banzhang, which is in the Banzhang area, it probably has something in common with Banzhang tea, even though they are high yield and therefore weaker teas. When you buy a true Lao Banzhang, I guess what you'll pay for is the intensity. I've had a couple of good Lao Banzhang, of course, and I would say that what makes them a truly unique experience is really the intensity. You know, it's like when you're used to listening to music on bad speakers on your phone, and suddenly you get a really nice headset or some high-end hi-fi system, and you hear the same music, but everything just feels more crisp, more detailed. That's what the Banzhang experience is, especially if you couple it with really good water, I would say. Now the problem with the fake Lao Banzhang, of course, I could go to the village and get some Banzhang tea. But even to get that Banzhang tea, you need some pretty good connections. You need to establish a connection with the farmers. And that's why I prefer to go to the satellite village. If we go back on Google Earth, so you have Lao Banzhang here. If you zoom out, so you have Banpen, which I guess has a similar profile, but maybe less tea gardens overall. And well, maybe the problem is the Banpen identity is quite erased by Lao Banzhang, because if you make good tea in Banpen, you're better off just selling it to farmers in Lao Banzhang than selling it under the Banpen name. You can sell at a higher price. Same for Bakanoi. Same if we go a bit further, I would say same for Pasha tea. So we'll study Pasha another day. This is quite a big village with some amount of gusu, of really big trees as well, and they are quite close in personality to Lao Banzhang tea. But I would say in terms of intensity, they are still a step below. You have those, or then you could just even do some more crazy blend, like for example Bulangshan with a bit of Yiwu is known to get you a bit closer to the Lao Banzhang taste. You take some very aggressive tea from Lao Menghai and add some very sweet, very soft tea from Yiwu, and with the right amount, you might get the good blend. Now that poses a problem. That poses an economics problem, and this is why I found it's much better now to buy from the satellite villages. I think we've reached the peak. We've already crossed like the peak of Pu-erh tea sales and Pu-erh tea fame due to the economic downturn we have in China. Now let's say you're a tea farmer in Lao Banzhang, and you produce 1 ton of tea a year from your own gardens, but you have lots of visitors and you can sell 2 tons of tea a year. Then what you can do is go on the surrounding villages and look for good tea there, and that's what people do. But let's say now a pandemic hits your country and suddenly you have a drop in tea demand, or the economic, and even more than the pandemic, actually, you have now an economic downturn. People cannot afford your Lao Banzhang tea anymore, or at least less. And that year, instead of selling 2 tons, you only sell 1 ton. Well, you're still okay because you produce 1 ton of tea. So you just sell your own tea. And you don't even need to lower the price that much to sell that tea. Now the problem is, what will happen to the satellite villages who before relied on you to get the tea, to sell their tea? Well, suddenly they sell 0, and that's what's happening now. So we will see the price of Lao Banzhang tea will remain high because it's a luxury product, and whatever the economic conditions, you will still have a fringe of the population who can afford these teas. But due to the reduced demand, the satellite villages will probably have a hard time selling their tea. And this is what this young guy I work with in Bacanoy told me. In the past, they didn't bother developing the industry too much. Now, the Lahu really in those places, they tend to be much more laid back, less business minded than the Khani or the Bulang. Okay, so despite having an increase in price of tea, they didn't look to produce more, to extend their tea gardens. So that's quite interesting. In a way, you could say they are bad at business, but I also like to buy from them because they tend to cheat you less. They are more laid back. They don't care that much, you know. So before, they just relied on selling fresh leaves to the farmers in Lao Banzhang, for example. But now, suddenly, they cannot do that. The Lao Banzhang farmers want less tea. Maybe they will keep buying the best teas. But what they want to do, at least a good opportunity for them now, is to develop their own trade network. The problem is when you have this opportunity, and we had the same thing in Laos. We worked in northern Laos at the border with Iwu. 90% of the tea there is sold as fake Iwu. And then the pandemic hit, they closed the border, and suddenly their trade network was totally closed. They solely relied on this type of customers. So even if in the short term it might be the best way to make money because you can sell at a higher price, it can be more worth it in the medium term to develop your own brand name, because nobody knows about Bacanoy. People know about Lao Banzhang. And I'm sure in the short term, if they want to sell their tea, you might as well go to the trade fair and say you're from Lao Banzhang than to say you're from Bacanoy, because nobody knows Bacanoy. And yeah, so that's you could say the price elasticity problem. If you're a satellite village, you're like a vassal state, you know, a satrapy. So you have to rely on the big boss, and in that area, the big boss is Lao Banzhang. And so to detach yourself from that big boss, well, there's a lot of things you need to change in your business. And that's why I'm happy to source in those satellite villages. Now, is Lao Banzhang tea overpriced? Well, is a Rolls-Royce overpriced? I checked that ratio. So today, if you want to buy like the good Rolls-Royce, it will cost you $500,000. And if you want to buy a Toyota Corolla, like average car, it will cost you $25,000. Okay, so with the Rolls-Royce, you can buy 20 average cars. And you could say this is quite a similar ratio with that Pu-erh tea. So the top price of those teas, they don't really tell you that this tea is 20 times better than the average tea. They just tell you that rich people have maybe can invest 20 times more money into their tea than the average tea enthusiast. I'm not comparing with the cheapest tea, of course. That would be hundreds of times higher. But you can see it in a way as a luxury product, sure. But I guess if you like cars, you would like to try a Rolls-Royce someday. So that's the same you could say with Lao Banzhang. It's probably not a daily drinker for everyone, but it can be interesting to experience it. I tried to source it last autumn, but honestly I was really disappointed. The tea we get in Bacana is much better actually than the samples I got. Now the problem is if I go there and just want to buy 5-10 kilo, I guess they won't give me the best tea, you know, because you have customers who buy a ton every year, and so of course they will get the privilege of having the best gardens and everything. So also just going to the village to buy a little bit of tea, it's also a good chance that you'll be cheated. You will get tea from somewhere else, or just tea from Lao Banzhang, which is not from the best gardens. And now you have a lot of fake outside the village. So even if you So if you go to Lao Banzhang, you can get mislabeled Lao Banzhang, but if you go to a tea market and look for Banzhang tea, probably 99% of it will be fake. And like I explained, they are fake, but not really scams, because you're paying maybe the right price for that blend. You know, that will be like a $30 Lao Banzhang cake. In a way, it's not really scamming people if it's like this. Now, of course, if you sell $2,000 a cake for a fake Lao Banzhang, then that would be more of a scam. But it's perfectly legal because there is no protection of the names in the Pu-erh tea industry. There is no geographic indication, so it's not illegal to mislabel your tea. And okay, so I've made some videos about this topic, and yeah, I guess you can watch them, or I will elaborate in future videos. But yeah, it is a great tea. Sometimes you get to have that experience of a great Lao Banzhang, but if you really want to study Lao Banzhang, it's quite a budget, because you will need to buy a lot of samples, try to build yourself a library of what that Banzhang taste is. And I prefer not to go into it and guarantee my customers the authenticity of the tea, so that's why I do the Bacchanoi. I haven't... Okay, we're just at the second brew, and the bitterness is not even starting now. It will build up in the third and fourth brew, and it goes quite more intense. But overall, it's a softer area than Bulangshan. That's what you need to remember. Some people will tell you like Lao Banzhang is aggressive tea, but for Menghai, for the Menghai character, you could say it's a moderate area, and that's why it is so praised, you could say. Because it has everything that you're looking for in a Menghai tea, and everything is intense. So authentic Lao Banzhang is hard to get, and you can settle for high-grade Hekai. Now, in my opinion, Hekai is a bit different from Lao Banzhang. I think it's much softer. We'll probably see that tomorrow. You can either get some blends, or I would say Bacchanoi and Pasha are the closest in taste to me to Lao Banzhang. Pasha would be maybe better, because Pasha is a bit less soft than Bacchanoi. In a way, I feel that Bacchanoi both has bitterness, but it's also very soft and very mouth-coating. Okay, so that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I will leave you with a last look at our leaves, which have not opened much. It's actually a tea that you can brew like 15 times, I would say, if you do strong brews. Maybe I will keep drinking it now, so that I will not sleep tonight. And okay, so that's about it.